Hi everyone, I'm Angela. This is Paperbacks Galore, and today I wanted to talk about all of my favorite romance books. These are all romance books that I gave 5 stars or very, very close to 5 stars, and books that I would highly recommend if you haven't picked them up yet or if you're new to romance and you're looking for where to start. None of these are like super dark or super out there. I haven't really tried a lot of like subgenres of romance, so these are like romance books for beginners and for anyone who's just curious about what books other people love. I want to start with one of the first contemporary romances I ever read, which is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I'm pretty sure my friend bought this just because it said beach read on the cover and we were going on vacation in Florida. So we each bought our own romance book and then at the end we switched. And this one is just amazing. It introduced me to basically the whole genre of contemporary romance. And I mean, this is a lot of people's favorite Emily Henry, but it's also just one of my favorite books of all time. There's a lot going on in this book. We have our main character, January, whose father has recently died, and on top of processing that, she has also learned about his kind of double life in which he was cheating on his wife and had this Michigan lake house with this other woman, and January is at this lake house for the summer because she needs to close up this house and get it sold, and she also needs to write her next romance book, but she has severe writer's block, understandably. An old rival of hers from college, Augustus, who writes like serious literary fiction, is weirdly enough living next door to her. And so they run into each other and it brings back some memories from college, but it's not like a second chance romance, really. There's not a ton of memories of them in college. January at first really wants to avoid Gus, but it can't be helped. They run into each other. They literally live next door to each other for the summer, and they end up striking a deal because Gus also has writer's block. So January is going to write something serious and brooding and sad, and Gus is going to write something with a happy ending that's more lighthearted and emotional. Part of what makes this book such a wonderful avenue for these two characters to fall in love is that in order to help Gus be able to write a love story or like a happy ending, he needs to go on like cute dates. So these two people who aren't dating are going on these dates that obviously lead them to fall in love, and I just love the Michigan setting as well. I'm not from Michigan, but I've lived here for a few years, so it feels really special to me that this book that I love takes place in Michigan, and I moved to Michigan to be with the person that I'm with, so just this book will always have a special place in my heart, and I still think it's the best of Emily Henry's books. Next, I want to talk about the book that I classify as my favorite romance of all time, which is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book is actually the third book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. Each book follows a different sister falling in love, and we see the sisters pop up in each of the books, and I actually read this third book first, and I think that you can totally do that, but I think all of the books are good, so I'm really recommending that you read the first one, the second one, and then Act Your Age, Eve Brown. The first one is called Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and the second one is Take a Hint, Danny Brown. The first book I gave 4 stars, the second I gave 4.5, and the third I gave 5. Eve Brown is a bit of a mess. She's very bubbly and fun and charming, but she does not have her life together at all. She goes through jobs like this. Her parents are actually quite wealthy. They live in England, but her parents are not okay with just paying for everything for her and letting Eve just lounge around the house. So they tell Eve that she needs to get a job and stick with it. And Eve is just driving around the Lake District in England one day, and she comes across this really cozy, picturesque inn, and she decides to go in and apply as a chef when she sees a sign. And Eve has never been a chef before, but she really enjoys cooking, so she just takes her shot. At this inn, we meet Jacob as he interviews her, and this is a dual POV romance, which just makes it like chef's kiss. And Jacob is very much kind of the opposite of Eve in that he is very organized and structured. He does not flit about from job to job. He doesn't really do things spontaneously. Jacob is autistic, and he immediately really dislikes Eve because it seems like she's just like making fun of things that he holds dear, or just like not taking them very seriously. And he actually runs this inn, it's his business, so he just doesn't really like the way that Eve presents herself at first. But Eve does get the job, and we watch these two fall in love while working at this cozy little inn in the Lake District. It's as perfect as it sounds, honestly. Next, I want to talk about the funniest romance book that I've ever read, which, you know, is also sweet and emotional and wonderful, but it's definitely the funniest, and that is You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. I read this on my Kindle while I was on a very serious book buying ban, and I literally finished this and went on the internet and bought a copy immediately. So that's how much I loved it, that I broke my very strict ban. This one is one that I would love to reread because I'm very forgetful, so I guarantee you I've forgotten all the jokes in this book. But basically we have our characters Naomi and Nicholas, and they are getting married in 3 months, and there's just one problem. They don't want to get married anymore. Nicholas comes from a wealthier family, and his mom is a lot. Like, not the kind of mom you want to have as a mother-in-law. And she will definitely make either of them pay back all of these wedding costs if either of them breaks off the wedding. And they both know this, and neither of them can really afford that. So they basically start pranking each other, annoying each other, trying to get the other one to just break it off so that the other person doesn't have to be the bad guy in the situation and bear the brunt of the wedding costs. Obviously that sounds like really stupid, and like I think the pitch is so hard because like saying just the pitch of it doesn't really capture Sarah Hogle's like humor and the chemistry between these characters, and like you can't explain it without reading it. I swear it doesn't get like super mean. It's not like the characters are like, you know, bullying each other or anything. Obviously it kind of feels like rivals to lovers who are very like playful, and obviously they start loving each other in a way that they hadn't loved each other before, and it's just really wonderful and sweet at some point, you know. And at the beginning it's more humorous and filled with tension and chemistry. And I just love this book so much. It's such a gem. I feel like it's one of the most underrated books on this list, and I hope that more people pick it up. Next up is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrun. This is a very emotional book that talks a lot about mental health issues. One of the characters has OCD, one of the characters has depression, and it honestly is a really big part of the story. So if that's not necessarily something that you are in the mood to read about, you can't really avoid it in this book. But if you are, especially if you're looking for more romance books that have meaningful representation for different identities, I think this would be a really good one to read. So the premise is a lot lighter and cuter. Basically, we have this Bachelor-esque reality dating show. Charlie is a wealthy, successful guy in the tech industry, but recently his reputation has taken a bit of a hit, and he really needs to get some good publicity and some good press to be able to show the company that he was working for that he's worth it. I think he got fired. Basically, he's using this dating show opportunity as a way to build back his reputation. a la Taylor Swift. Just kidding. But Charlie is like the sweetest character ever. Like, he is just so, like, you can't read this book and hate Charlie. Like, you're gonna love Charlie. I will say I don't remember as much about Dev, but Dev is the producer that Charlie ends up falling in love with, and obviously Charlie is meant to be dating all of these women in this dating show, and the person that he's actually developing feelings for is Dev. And I think the dating show portion is really fun, especially since the author really makes sure to make personalities for the side characters. They're not just like completely boring, thoughtless, you know, side characters. They actually have fun personalities, and so you're kind of like getting to know these main characters and these side characters. And personally, I don't really like dating shows, but I love them in books. I don't know, I just think the people are always better in books. Like, I always hate the people on the TV, but in books, I always like enjoy reading about their personalities. I will say, I ended up giving this one 4.75 stars, which is a really like dumb rating to give. It was like so close to a 5-star, more than a 4.5 star. I think for me it was just a little bit too heavy. It does have a happy ending, don't worry. It was just a little bit like I wanted some more light moments to balance out some of the heavier moments with like the mental health conversations. But overall, this is a really great one, and I would highly recommend it. Next up, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is one that I read this year, so it's a little bit more fresh in my memory. So if I talk about it with like more enthusiasm than the others, it's just because I actually remember the details more. But basically we have our main characters, Brianna and Jacob, and this is actually a follow-up book to a series, and the first book is Part of Your World, which I also gave 5 stars, but I chose Yours Truly because I didn't want to talk about both, but you should absolutely read Part of Your World first. But Brianna is an ER doctor. She is going through a divorce from a shitty man who did not treat her right, and she, you know, obviously is not very happy. And what doesn't help is this new guy at work named Jacob, who comes off just as a jerk, as an asshole, and she really doesn't like him. And we do get both perspectives, and we do see Jacob's side of it. And for Jacob, he hasn't actually done anything wrong. He's just really, really, really anxious. And sometimes that leads him to say things that he shouldn't, or come off as really cold or uninterested. You know, just like, obviously there's some disconnect there between like a bubbly, friendly person that he probably wants to be and how anxious he is. And in order to kind of clear up this misunderstanding and make sure that Brianna doesn't hate him, he writes her a letter. And these two start writing letters back and forth, and it's so sweet. Obviously, you can't have an entire book of just two characters writing letters together, so the other main like trope in this book comes in when Jacob needs Brianna to be his date for his brother's wedding. Not only does he need her to be his date, but also his fake girlfriend. His brother is actually getting married to Jacob's ex-girlfriend, and his whole family has been really like patronizing of him. They all kind of think he's pathetic, they pity him, and Jacob hates that so much. And he knows that if he comes in with a gorgeous girlfriend who's really fun and interesting, they're just gonna let him be and be happy for his brother and leave him alone, and that's all that he wants. This book made me cry, it made me laugh a number of times. I would say it was almost as funny as this one. Not quite, but like, it was really funny in a way that I was not expecting. I love Jacob so much, like so much. He's definitely one of my favorite male main characters now. And I just, please read this book. It's so good. I don't know what else to say. It made me so happy. It was such an enthusiastic 5-star, and I can't wait to see what Abby Jimenez does next. Alright, we have 2 more books to go, and the next one is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Our main characters are Eva and Shane, and this book also has some chronic illness representation. Eva gets chronic migraines, and we really see how it affects her life. And these 2 characters are both writers, and they have a past. They spent 7 days in June together as teenagers, and so we do get some flashbacks to them as teenagers, and in the present day they are meeting at this like writers event, some kind of conference or dinner or something in the city for writers, and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And what the other doesn't know is that they have kind of been writing each other into their books for years. It's like their characters are inspired by the other, which is just so romantic. And this book was really interesting because it kind of feels like it's written in a literary fiction kind of style for some of it, and some of it is like feels more like a romance, contemporary romance style of writing with a lot of humor. I really enjoyed Ava's kind of lifestyle. She's so successful and funny and just like has enough, you know, money and joy in her life, and she doesn't really need a man. She has a lovely daughter, and I just think her life was really interesting, just like seeing a successful writer with a daughter and a best friend. It was so lovely to see that. I don't know why, but that's kind of like what my mind latched onto. And then she, I think, writes like paranormal romance books, if I'm not mistaken, and he writes a little bit more like serious books. And we just watch them fall in love again. We watch them, we see what happened to them as kids when they were in love, as teenagers, and I just thought it was excellent. It's been a while since I've read it, I will admit, so this one is one that I may reread someday, but I remember in my review I was like, this was excellent, and I don't feel that way about most of the romances I read, and I think I stand by that for sure. So highly recommend. This one is a little bit heavier even than The Charm Offensive. Definitely check the content warnings for this one. It's not quite as light and fluffy as most of these other ones, but I still think it's just such a unique romance book. That's really the word. It's unique. And sometimes in romance you need that, because a lot of the same tropes get recycled and you're just like, didn't I just read this book? But 7 Days in June is different. Only When It's Us. That's the next book. I was supposed to say Next Up, but Only When It's Us by Chloe Liese. I'm so excited about it. I literally just read it this month in November of 2023. That is when I'm filming this video. That is when I read the book. I read this on audio, and then I loved it so much that I bought the ebook so that I could listen and read. And I went into this not knowing the synopsis, and I really loved that. I'm struggling to come up with a synopsis that doesn't give anything away, but like you have to give something away in a synopsis. Basically, we have a sports romance in which our main character, Willa, is a soccer athlete at her college in California, and she is an amazing soccer player. She's very dedicated to her sport, and she is obviously also doing school full-time, so she has a lot on her plate. And she kind of gets thrown together with this other student named Ryder, who's also in one of her more difficult classes. And let's just say they kind of get off on the wrong foot, and the professor kind of just like throws them together time after time for reasons which you will understand when you read the book, hopefully. And yeah, it's kind of like a one-sided rivals to lovers, and we just see Willa dealing with you know, trying to be a student athlete. Her mother is actually ill with cancer in the hospital during all of this, so we also follow her dealing with that and taking care of her mother as much as she can. Ryder is such a just lovely character too. He's a lot less soft than some of the other male characters that I tend to like really gravitate towards, but he is actually also a former soccer athlete, and basically he had to leave for an unexpected reason, and so we also learn about that within the book. And I don't know how to explain this to you. It's not very tropey, I will say, and there's not a ton of soccer content. That's something that always like makes me hesitant about sports romances, is that I truly do not give a fuck about sports. But I love this book, guys. I loved it so much. Writer is deaf, so we talk a lot about what it's like for him to be newly deaf, especially, and how people treat him and how people should accommodate him and they don't, and really, really interesting representation there, really interesting conversations. Just something about their chemistry and their dynamic was so incredibly well done. It can't be described in like a trope. You just have to read it. I really appreciated that it was set at college. Please read this book. This is the first book in the Bergman Brothers series, and each book is a different like brother, obviously. And these are actually getting like picked up by traditional publishing, by Berkeley, and they're getting new covers and they're being released next year, and I will be purchasing every single one of them. So yeah. Thank you all for watching my fave romance book recommendation video. I hope there's a book that you haven't read before that you can add to your TBR. Let me know what some of your favorite romance books are, and I hope you have a lovely week. Bye!